so people can there. So thank you so much for, oh, I have no idea how to stop this doorbell when someone is joining. Anyway, so I'm really, really happy that you're here with us today. And thank you so much. And also everyone, thank you so much for joining us. And the people that would watch that also later. So I saw a post that Dan posted on one of the Airbnb groups, a local Airbnb group. And I was just, it was so inspiring. It was a post about his intention of buying about 20 properties in the upcoming months and creating a fund all focused on Airbnb. So I had to talk with him and learn more about it. And as we talked, I thought it would be also, even before, it would be so inspiring for other investors. And I couldn't just have it all just for me. So I wanted to share it with more people. So thank you so much. And Dan and Nate and Vince from Home Hop Property Management, right?
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah, so introduce yourself, guys.
Yeah. So yeah, my name is Dan. First off, appreciate all you guys hopping on here today. I know everyone's time is valuable, and we plan on giving as much value as possible. I've been in real estate since 2015. I started as a real estate agent, and then I've also coached agents. I have experience with traditional property management with your standard rentals. I was involved in some apartment syndications where I had a total of 100 units. Ultimately, sold one of the buildings and sold my ownership in the other building, and then hopped into short-term rentals through Airbnb. And Nate and I initially we worked on our our portfolio together. Had a lot of success with it, and ultimately launched our short-term rental property management company. Had some success with that, and now we're in the process of our fund. So Vince is another one of our partners who's on the call here. He came on board when we launched the fund, and he's helped us quite a bit with that piece and just gaining traction with that. That's it from me. Nate or Vince, whoever wants to go next.
Yeah, I can make a quick introduction.
Go for it, Nate.
I'll kick it off, Vince, and I'll hand it off to you. Perfect. Nate Klatt, I'm one of the co-founders with Dan here. Dan and I he had already started in real estate. I joined him around 3 years ago. I'm a CPA by trade, and then working my way into full-time real estate now. So still have a W-2 job while working with Dan right now. We did 10 flips together, as Dan mentioned. We've now grown a portfolio of 9 Airbnb rentals across Cleveland. We have another 10 clients on board. And then, again, we're excited to launch our fund. We're already over $1 million of commits on our fund. So continue to grow and scale that as we, again, look to continue to just grow this team out. So quick background, then I'll let Vince take it away.
Yeah, thanks everyone for your time. Vince Bayera, I'm one of the other co-founders. I operate as
someone has to mute.
Looks like it's Ben.
Ben is over.
Oh.
Mute yourself. There we go.
Oh, good. So yeah, my name's Vince Bayera. I'm a co-founder and chief revenue officer. My background's that of an entrepreneur. I've worked with numerous startups, including a current role as a partner in one of the largest healthcare e-learning companies in the world. I have my own brand as an online direct-to-consumer business and have raised millions of dollars over the years in different capacities. So came on to work with Nate and Dan because I acted as a passive investor with those guys in a few other projects, always made the money that I anticipated and, we had agreed upon. And we started talking about how we could do this a little bigger. And if we just had a fund of all the capital up front, we could build a better portfolio faster. So as they mentioned, we're just about a month out from our launch. We already have over $1 million committed with a number of strong commitments to come. We have a number of family offices that have expressed significant interest and groups somewhat similar to you all that have also shown a significant interest in that short-term rental market just because of how lucrative it is. And again, a lot of the track record that Nate and Dan have built over time to be able to show past performance, be able to really have that in-depth knowledge of the market. And what I'll just add one more quick note around is that Nate, Dan, and myself are all from the Northeast Ohio market. They're all from that Cleveland, Ohio market. Nate and myself live now in California, but Dan still lives in the area, handles all the operations day by day. And so it gives us a little bit of an edge up on just general investors who have been attracted to a particular market because we think it's lucrative. We actually live there. We actually grew up there and have family there and have, a lot of connections there. So I just thought I'd add that in as you get to know us a bit in terms of who we are, why we started there, things like that. But otherwise, Dan, I'll hand it back to you to continue on.
Thank you.
Julia, I think that covers everything with intros.
Yeah, okay, so we finished today. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, so we also have like a set of questions. So we'll also go through these. So you have spoken a bit about it, but I do want you to dive a bit more to what made you go from deciding to go all in on short-term rentals and not stay, Ronald and I really like to have like a diverse portfolio. We like to have our long-terms, our mid-term rentals, and also our short-term rentals. And you decided to take all of your long-term rentals and just focus on short-term. And that's really interesting. Would you mind sharing what made you do that shift?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing, and I guess it depends on when you ask me this question, because if you say, hey, why did you get out of coaching and why did you get out of your real estate agent business? It was because of time. The money was great, had a nice little income, but ultimately it was time. I was a new father. I now have 2 little kids, and there was one time I remember where one of my daughters came up to me and she wanted to play with me. And I said, hold on, I got to finish writing up this offer and then I'll play. And then I realized I was being like that father that you see in the movies who's never really like present with their kids. So that's how I got into real estate investing, is I wanted to buy more of my time back. Once I got into investing, like I mentioned, Nate and I, we flipped a couple apartment buildings, some single family homes, and it's a lot harder to scale a flipping or remodeling business side of the real estate compared to short-term rentals. So at the time, I was already doing short-term rentals just as a hobby. Like I had 2, and it was more so like, yeah, we have a couple Airbnbs, but we're not really doing what we need to do to maximize our revenue. And I also thought I knew everything, and I was completely off with that. So ultimately it was about scalability. And then once we got into Airbnbs full time, it was all about creating the automations, the systems, the processes for anything and everything: cleaning, designing, maintenance, contracting, just having a system for anything and everything.
And just to add one thing to that, Dan, well said, is I think from your perspective, Julia, when investing, it probably is wise to be diversified. But in terms of a fund, whenever you start a fund, we can't just go after everything. This deal looks good today and that one tomorrow. You really want to be focused. And that kind of forced us to really get clear on what we were looking for, what area, what price range, things like that. So just thought I'd point that out, that instead of maybe other funds that are open to any kind of deal, we really wanted to be particular in what we were looking for.
That's a good point. Interesting. Yeah, so as we see in the recent years, short-term rentals have gained a lot of popularity. So what do you think are the key factors that drive this trend? And what do you do to position yourself and take advantage of it?
Nate, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, so I actually was listening to a podcast from AirDNA, which is one of the leading data analytics companies, this morning. And one of the things they hit on was what are the different types of amenities and features that really set apart Airbnbs or short-term rentals versus hotels. Some of the things they called out was that one, those larger homes, those 3+ bedroom homes. Again, I'm someone that travels with friends and family, and I'd much prefer to be able to have the kitchen to have all of our friends and family under one roof. I actually had my bachelor party 2 months ago, and both of these guys stayed with me at a bachelor party in an Airbnb, and you kind of have that aspect of price wise, it's significantly cheaper when you're splitting that amongst multiple parties. And then the other aspect is kind of like what sets it apart is going to be, okay, we have having the right look. So for us, like whenever we're looking at properties, is it needs to be renovated properties. It needs to fit the modern design. You need to be properties that you'd really want to stay at. I think that's kind of one of the differences between long-term rentals and short-term rentals is if you put a short-term rental on Airbnb and it doesn't look good, it's just not going to book. Long-term rentals, you do have the ability to put something on there. Maybe you need to lower that price point. So instead of renting for $2,000, it rents for $1,200, but you're still going to find a renter for it traditionally. And so it really requires you to be a hospitality business as opposed to that long-term rental where it's focused on, okay, quantity. When it comes to short-term rentals, it's quality. And I think that's one thing that, again, we've tried to really focus on as we've scaled is, just kind of having all those different touches. One of the ones I will touch on quickly is we put arcades. There's these things called mini arcade ones. We put little arcades into all of our properties, get a ton of feedback on how kids love the arcades. Very small, simple touch, but it's something that gives us to customers a chance to remember us by, give us that 5-star review, and then in turn, again, increase our occupancy through those high ratings.
That's awesome. Yeah, I really like the arcades. I've seen it also in a few properties. It's really nice.
You know what's funny is we have these at a lot of our properties, and recently one of them broke. This is the first time one of them broke, and I think we've had 3 guests stay there, and every single guest has mentioned it. And so it just goes to show, like, sometimes you do these things in the beginning, and then you don't realize, like, hey, somebody could be booking your house because they have a little one that's with them and they want to play the arcade, or even if it's just like a couple of adults. Like if it's me, Vince, and Nate going to an Airbnb and it has an arcade, you know that we're playing it and we're going to be competitive. So just want to call that out too.
Yeah, so also could you explain a bit, how do you feel it's different? Well, you touched it a bit, but traditional long-term rentals and short-term rentals in terms of investment strategy and the management.
Yeah, kind of what Nate touched on in the previous question. The biggest thing is just quality over quantity. On top of that, when you're buying an Airbnb, you want to make sure that the area feels safe. So like if people are going to be out at nighttime, are they going to feel comfortable, or is it like, I'd probably just hang out inside? So that's the biggest piece is your location, making sure it's safe. And then as Nate mentioned, we will only manage and we will only buy properties that are completely remodeled. We want our houses updated because when we update them and they show better, so when we have granite countertops, soft close cabinets, nice backsplashes, nice bathrooms, nice furniture, we're going to attract a higher quality guest, which is then going to translate into higher revenue as well. Now, you could certainly shortcut and just throw like cheap furniture, just do like a basic remodel. But those are the properties where you're going to run a risk of having parties. And then ultimately, there's a lot of competition, and those other properties are going to be booked before yours, and you're going to be left with the last minute guests most of the time.
The one other kind of point I'll throw there too, as far as like that distinguishment between long-term and short-term, we work with another property manager in Cleveland who I think he has 400 plus long-term rental units that he property manages, and he had a few short-term rental units. He actually reached out to us and was like, hey, short-term rental isn't for me, just a different business. And part of that is really the way you have to leverage different technologies in order to really scale this business. So if you have 1 or 2 units and maybe it's your primary vacation home, you can, an individual can manage that. If you have anywhere from that like 5 to 10 units and you don't put in the proper software, the proper systems to get the right people in place, it's really not a scalable business. So for us, I think we're on 7 different softwares. We have a head cleaner, we have 7 cleaning teams, we have a head maintenance, we have a director of operations, we have a virtual assistant that works with us for messaging. So it's really like this large team, and that's on right now 20 properties. The nice thing is now you have that base in place, but it really is like, how do you put in the best tech stack where when you're doing long-term rentals, there's maybe 1 or 2 different softwares you're using, but there's not quite that same level of day-to-day operations that really goes on with a short-term rental.
Yeah, that's a great call out. Yeah, we try to do automations for, again, anything and everything. So smart locks that can look at our calendar and automatically sets the guest code, automatically sends that code to the guest. We use ChatGPT now to analyze our reviews and tell us if there's a maintenance issue, so I don't have to look through our reviews every single day. We have a couple bots set up with Slack, which is like our chat room, and I won't bore you with everything else. That's just a couple examples.
That's really not boring. Keep on.
And then one of our favorite softwares as well, again, especially for short-term rentals, is you have to have a dynamic pricing software. So we use Price Labs.
Yes.
That's going to act very similar to a hotel, where it's going to look at demand, and it's going to increase or decrease the prices based on day of week demand. One of the interesting ones right now is actually there's an eclipse that's going through Cleveland on sometime in April of next year. And we've already had, in one, Price Labs increased our pricing significantly. So it's about 4x the price it would normally be. We've already had half our properties booked for that week in April. But again, we were able to quadruple our pricing because it saw the demand increase going on there. So you have this pricing algorithm that's automatically going to update your pricing for you. Again, you have to make sure you're still fine tuning it. And then having a property management software. So we're on VRBO, we're on Airbnb, we have a direct booking website, and you really want to have that one centralized location so that you have the ability to kind of that full picture, that financial picture. You can see what your revenues are looking like, what your occupancy, your ADR, what your average daily rate. So really like getting into the numbers. And that's where we use a property management software called HostAway. There's a number of ones out there. A lot of these weren't even in existence 5 years ago, but because of the maturity that short-term rentals is starting to see, it's still, I wouldn't say it's infancy, but it's definitely not mature yet, but you're starting to see a lot more technologies that are geared towards that short-term rental space because there are so many different operational obstacles you have to tackle.
Yeah, that's true. It's really so interesting to see how much technology is already put into it, and there's like so many options to choose from. Yeah, so thank you. So also we have challenges, right? So what would you say are the main challenges and also benefits associated to short-term rentals, and also in regards and comparison to long-term rentals?
I would say, again, this is one of those questions. It depends on where you're at. So if you're brand new getting into Airbnb and looking back at what our biggest challenges were when we first started, it's finding a good cleaning team. So especially in the beginning, having the wrong cleaning team in place can legitimately just tear your business down to the point where Airbnb could actually deactivate you. But also on the cleaning piece, again, having a system and process in place. So what we do is every single time one of our cleaning team cleans a property now after a guest checks out, they know the process. They know that they have to take a video that's timestamped and has the property address on there. So if there are any issues, we have everything documented from the previous guest to this guest. If anything's broken, we can prove it to Airbnb and get reimbursed for that. So by far, make sure you have a solid cleaning team in place. Biggest challenge today, I would say, is just, again, it's a real estate investment, but it's a hospitality business. So when you get to the point of having, like right now, we're at around 20 properties, you're going to have different issues that pop up every single day, and just being able to navigate and work through those issues. As Nate mentioned before, we have a really good team in place now where everyone just kind of comes together and they solve the problems themselves, whether it be a maintenance issue, whether it be, hey, you guys said that there was going to be ice and there's no ice. So maybe it's just figuring out, okay, who can run ice to this guest, or can we DoorDash it? Things like that. Biggest benefits, I would say, when people hear Airbnb or VRBO, they think short-term rental, but there's a lot of flexibility with that as well, to where you can have midterm stays as well. So what we talked about earlier with our dynamic pricing software, not only does it increase revenue, but the further out that we have a vacant day and a guest is trying to book, we have a higher night minimum. So when we set it up like that, 2 months from now, nobody can book 2 nights 2 months from now. It's just not possible. I think our minimum's at 4 nights or 5 nights. So what that encourages is it keeps our calendar open. So if we do have a traveling nurse, a traveling doctor, somebody on a work assignment, somebody shooting a film, whatever it may be, they have the option to stay there for the entire month. And now we're going to obviously get a lot more revenue as well, because pricing's higher, minimum night stays higher, and overall it's just a huge benefit. So I would say that's one of the benefits. And one thing in addition to that is, again, sometimes people hear Airbnb and they think parties, and, oh, I don't want to do Airbnbs because I don't want to deal with party guests. There's ways to kind of lower that risk of parties happening. It's still going to happen every once in a while, but we have the systems and processes in place where we can identify when they happen and what to do after they happen. But I completely lost my train of thought. I was talking about parties. Nate, do you know where I was going? Could you tell?
We talked
Not
about
100% sure.
challenges. Maybe that's
What's that, Julia?
we talked about challenges and benefits.
Yes. So is the maintenance piece. A lot of people hear parties and, oh, I don't want my house destroyed. The reality is on Airbnb and VRBO, the property is being cleaned multiple times a week by a professional cleaner. That means like new linens, the floors are getting mopped, they're getting vacuumed. But what they're also doing is they're looking for maintenance issues. Because if a maintenance issue pops up, and let's say a light bulb's not working, or a toilet's not working, or a shower's not working, the next guest is going to complain about it. And eventually, if we don't fix it, that's going to make its way into our reviews by one guest or multiple guests. So if we don't address that right away, and again, have a system and process to document it's been done, ultimately it's going to reflect on our reviews. And with Airbnb and their algorithm, when you start to get those negative reviews and you don't receive 5-star reviews, you slowly start to move down in the ranking. So now if somebody's searching for a house in Cleveland for these certain dates, and maybe our house is available, we're not going to show up on that first page or the top few results. It's going to be somebody else. So it's very important to just constantly keep up with your properties. So I would say that's actually a really big benefit of short-term rentals, on top of obviously more revenue as well.
That's a really good point.
Yes, but what are you doing if, for example, there is only one day between the guest that is leaving to the guest who is enter, or less than one day, and you find problems that you have to solve it, but you cannot do it before the guest will arrive?
That's a great question. We actually don't have a gap. So a lot of times we have a check-in, like let's say we have a guest checking in today, or I'm sorry, let's say we have a guest checking out today. A lot of times we'll have another guest checking in that same day. So what do we do when there are issues? So our top cleaning teams, they all have ozone machines and HEPA air purifiers in their car. So if they get to a house and they walk in and they're like, oh my gosh, a guest smoked inside, they immediately bring that ozone machine inside, their purifiers inside, and they start running those as they continue to clean. If they're done and it's still like a lingering issue, we're kind of at an advantage because we do have a decent sized portfolio for our area. So a lot of times we can put them into one of our other properties and just switch them to something else. Or what else we can do is we can put them in a hotel for the night. So we'll pay for the hotel. Hey, don't cancel the booking. We got you a hotel. Here's the address. Here's the check-in time, all the details. And then the following day, they'll check in. And then that gives us an extra day to get in there and do what we need. But that is also very rare. Most of the time, we have everything ready and cleaned by 4 o'clock.
I was going to say one follow-up to that is, and this is something that you'll learn quickly as you start to communicate with guests. I think we've done the hotel thing once in 2 years. It's not a commonplace. But what you find is if you're communicative and you're transparent with guests, and I think this is, I mean, honestly, all aspects of life, but when it comes to Airbnb, is if you're transparent with what happened, hey, the last guest was here, this happened, we could fix it, you know, tomorrow during your stay. Do you mind? Maybe we'll give them a $25 credit for the inconvenience, and our person will come over and fix it the next day. But if you're transparent with what's going on, people understand things happen. People understand it's a home. You know, we have landscapers out there weekly, and we let them know, hey, there's going to be a landscaper. It's part of the process of staying in a short-term rental. So I think that transparency, communication, as long as you're good at that, and it's not well, just don't say anything and let the problem linger, that's when people start to get frustrated and when there's that lack of communication. One other thing, just to kind of go back, you mentioned the benefits and the challenges, and I think Dan hit on a few good ones. Again, with, you know, the property maintenance, especially. Again, we have a maintenance team that's going through and checking our properties consistently along with the cleaners. So we had a long-term rental before. The guests got out after 18 months and they trashed the place. We had checked in it once halfway and it was fine, and in the second half it was trashed, and it would cost us some decent money, as opposed to getting the short-term rentals where it's constantly being cleaned, checked on, and you're in a better shape property. But the benefit Dan did, I think it's obvious, but didn't necessarily touch on, was just the fact that our revenues are close to 3x when we're doing Airbnb versus long-term rentals. So I think that goes without saying, but significant financial advantage if you set up the Airbnb properly. And that's really what allowed us to excel our own portfolio, you know, excel with our property management clients, and then create this fund where investors are getting these much higher returns than they're getting in the stock market. We still get a nice profit, so we're very heavily incentivized, but it's because there is this extra revenue growth through the short-term rental versus like a long-term rental fund.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Also, you mentioned that you had a coaching experience. Do you feel it's something you're using also today in what you're doing now that helps somehow?
Definitely. Honestly, the biggest thing is just working with our team and building that team camaraderie. So like everyone within the team, like we all probably talk to each other every single day. And whether that's like team meetings, us just typing back and forth in our Slack channel, but really showing our people that I care about them. And when I say I mean me, Nate, and Vince. I think a lot of people that work for somebody else, sometimes they just feel like a warm body and like, oh, this person doesn't actually care about me. And I think when you actually show your people appreciation and that you're glad that they're in your corner, it goes a long way. So I'd say that's the biggest thing as far as the coaching experience, how it's translated.
I think one piece on that too, and this is just something that maybe semi-specific to our team, but that coaching aspect, and then that a lot of our team is former athletes, which I always just kind of love working with other athletes. I was a college football player. Vince was a college football player. Dan was one of my high school teammates. And it's how do you create a team of people you enjoy working with? And that's another fun aspect of this, because it really is a team. Like we had our team call today. There were 7 people on the call discussing how do we get better? How do we improve? What are the challenges? How do we eliminate the blockers that are stopping us from succeeding? So like, again, that mindset aspect and bringing those wins to the team is always a huge benefit.
Yeah, that's so true. Amazing that you're all you have this background. That's cool. So you all knew each other, right? You said you knew previously.
Yeah, we all went to the same high school together.
Yeah.
Vince was a little bit older than us, but then ironically, him and Nate both moved out to San Diego, California around the same time, and kind of linked up that way. And then this just kind of all came together.
That's so amazing. So also something else that's very common when speaking about real estate is how location is an important thing. The famous phrase location, location, location. And you also mentioned that. So in short-term rentals, is there anything else? So you talked about amenities, but it was more inside the house, but what is the things you're looking at when searching for a place that would be a good area for short-term rental?
Yeah, as far as location, again, it's just about making sure a guest feels safe and comfortable. On top of that, we also provide security systems at all of our houses just to provide like another sense of security. So I would say safety is by far the number one thing. Other factors that we're focusing on with our fund too is we get a lot of questions with, hey, is there a fenced backyard? So when we have a fenced backyard, that now means that we can allow dogs, which means we can generate more revenue through pet fees. But as far as like criteria for location, it's just yeah, just making sure your guests feel comfortable. One other thing is like maybe you're just getting started and it's like I don't know where to buy. Just look at how many hotels are in the area. So if you're not familiar with an area, look at how many hotels in the area, and that'll tell you if there's a demand or not. If you want to take it a step further, go to Airbnb's website and just act like you're a guest and start shopping around of different Airbnbs in the area you're interested in buying in. Um, and that'll give you an idea as well as if that's somewhere that you want to invest in. But yeah, like A B type areas is what we aim for.
I was gonna say, just to kind of follow up on that a little bit, you have to be in a strong area, so you don't want to be in an area where people feel unsafe, which Dan kind of touched on. So those A-B areas, specifically, again, you can go and invest in San Diego, California, where it's $1 million home market, but you're not going to cash flow. So for us, it was also finding a market where it fit the value of the home to the gross revenue that you can succeed in. So even within Cleveland market, there's certain suburbs. So for us, like Parma is a suburb of ours where we're getting homes for around $250,000. They can still gross in the 60s. So we kind of really get this great value to it. Whereas if you go up, 5 miles up into the Ohio City area, which is just directly west of Cleveland, the homes might be $500,000, and now they're grossing $80,000. So you're not getting that same return when you start looking at it. So it's making sure you're in a very safe area, and then you're looking at that cash flow number. Again, we're definitely cash flow investors. We focus on that cash on cash return as like kind of like the top priority. So, kind of finding that sweet spot and, maybe making a little quick pro forma. And then again, as Dan said, kind of peeking around on Airbnb and seeing what other competitors are doing. AirDNA is another great tool if you're trying to find a market. It doesn't always have the greatest like per home, but as far as the aggregate goes, it gives you a general sense of like how much revenues you might be able to expect in different locations.
Yeah, I also really like Rabu. I think it's also a great site. I really like using it. Also, like it's similar to Airbnb. I think it's great. So a lot of people are really concerned about the operational aspects of going into Airbnbs and short-term rentals in general. People believe that it's a lot of work and that it's just too much and maybe it's not worth it. So that's in terms of managing it and everything. Do you have any advice to offer individual looking to enter into this market?
Yeah, kind of what we touched on earlier is this is technically a real estate investment, but it's a hospitality business. So you got to listen to your guests. You got to take care of your guests. Again, that doesn't mean that you have to do everything, but have the pieces in place or have a good property management company in place with Airbnbs that can handle the situation. But I think the biggest thing is just listen to feedback that you get and have an open mind and say, and just think to yourself, like, maybe this actually does make sense and the guest isn't just complaining and just taking care of your people.
I think on that point too, if you're going to have one Airbnb, and you're like, hey, it's close to home, it's one Airbnb, I might do a lot of the self-management for it. So I'm going to clean it, I'm going to furnish it. I think it's very doable to have 1 or 2 Airbnbs close to you. If you're going to have the aim is, hey, I want to have 5+ Airbnbs, really have to hone in and start to build out the processes, build out the infrastructure, build out the technology, build out the team. They have one of the masterminds we're in for short-term rentals. They call it the hectic host. And that's the individual that's in that 5 to 10, a hectic host.
Oh.
And that's someone that's going through and they're doing all the guest messaging, they're doing the cleaning, they're being the maintenance man. And that's just a quick equation for burnout. So I think it really depends on what your goal is. If your goal is to scale, then you can get the technology in place and there's plenty of ways to scale a business. If your goals have 1 to 2, then you can self-manage. But if you're like, hey, I'd like to have this 5 to 10 or be this like smaller shop, but I'm not going to put the right process in place, I would say it's a recipe for disaster.
And I'll build on that too, because, you know, there's the old expression, one man's trash is another man's treasure. And I think if you start with the end in mind on what you want your portfolio, time commitment, everything else to look like, that would point you back to what kind of business is right for you. As you're hearing Dan and Nate explain all this, this is not a put a renter into a long-term apartment and walk away and very little ongoing management. This is a day in, day out, operational excellence kind of approach that you've got to have the right mindset, team, and systems to build on and to execute on to ultimately be profitable. And so, you know, to your question is, why would somebody want to do this if it's a lot more work than, say, other things? Well, there's more revenue to be made, but you have to work the business every day. You can't just put a renter in there and walk away and hope that it's going to be okay. So Dan and Nate did a really great job in those early days building that infrastructure and framework. And now what we're doing is honing in and trying to continue to isolate areas of the business that we can make small, improvements in to ultimately help the bottom line. But it's, again, that day in, day out workload that you just got to be ready for. Like Nate's saying, if you're going to build a portfolio, it's going to be work. And it just kind of goes back to what you're open for. And some people don't want that, but some people say, hey, I'm willing to work my butt off so we can make a little bit more money for ourselves and our investors.
And do you think someone can have a property manager or a co-host or something and be completely passive? Can people do that?
Yeah, that's what our fund offers.
Mm-hmm.
Is instead of you doing the work, you work with us, you invest with us, and you can be 100% passive. And you'll get updates, you'll have an idea of the things we're doing. So yes, you could do that in terms of investing with us. And then Dan, I think you were going to lead in there with the property management aspect of what you were maybe going to talk through.
Yep. So there's the fund that Vince just touched on, and then also our property management company. We don't do any regular standard rentals. It's just short-term rentals all day, every day. Like I mentioned, I'm full-time. We have several other team members involved that are full-time, and this is all I do all day, every day. So yeah, we can certainly help on that end as well.
Also, lately we see a lot of we know that regulations and all of the legal things, it's very delicate. And we see now in New York that they just banned short-term rentals and other areas too. And it can happen with HOAs or cities that just decide. I know in metro markets, it's even more, it can be unexpected. And what do you do with these challenges? How do you monitor it, or do you have other exit plans? What do you do with these regulations?
Yeah, you want to take that one?
A couple points to that. So we actually one of the local attorneys around the area, that's like one of the larger real estate investors in Cleveland. We actually had a conversation with him just a couple of days ago. So one, it's connecting with your local councilman, your local, whoever's kind of enforcing the laws. So right now, for instance, for the city of Cleveland, there's a group of about 10 different short-term rental hosts in Cleveland that are constantly connecting with his name is Senator or Councilman McCormick, connecting with him and really trying to outline, here's a plan that we think would benefit both the residents of Cleveland as well as short-term rental hosts. And again, we're all in favor of smart regulations that make sense. So again, you don't want to have the hosts that are having the one-night parties that neighbors are complaining about. So it's like, how do you put in smart regulations and really working with them? One of the things that we're actually going to start doing as well, and we do focus whenever we go to buy a property, one, we make sure it's one that's already ideally has regulations in place, or at the least does not have any, anti short-term rental rules in place. But even things like going to a charity event for some of these councilmen and going and starting to kind of make that introduction. So one of our goals that we actually wrote down for Dan this year, we just talked about this a couple of days ago, but is City of Parma is one of the ones where we have more concentration of rentals units. They already have short-term rentals in place, but we want to start to make connections with the councilmen there. So Dan's going to go to one of their events here coming up, kind of start to shake hands, start to know who they are, and then say, hey, we'd love to even have you come to our homes, see the types of safety measures we put in place, see how we're really being professional hosts, and really kind of push on this, like it should be professional hosts, it should be people doing the right things. And so how do we create rules and say, hey, should there be cameras, should there be noise sensors, these different things that are going to help eliminate the nuisance that a lot of people see from a short-term rental location. One other thing, maybe more specific to our market, and specifically in Ohio, is Columbus and Cincinnati, which are the two other major cities in Ohio, recently passed laws that require permits. They require some amount of checking, but they passed laws recently allowing short-term rentals as long as you follow XYZ rules. Cleveland's on track to do a similar proposal right now. So kind of knowing your area, when you're in the big cities, those are the ones that are more likely to end up outlawing it. So that's why you are seeing the New Yorks, the Chicago, and some of these really major metros. And that's also where you probably have more hotel lobbyists going on as well. Whereas, some of the second tier cities like a Cleveland don't quite have the same infrastructure and the same lobbying behind it in order to kind of try to eliminate that short-term rental stay.
And I would just add too that that's one of the benefits of our team being located in Northeast Ohio, and we're not just trying to do all this remotely. We're boots on the ground. Dan's there to attend the events, to shake hands. Nate's there right now, meeting people, having conversations. And just to protect the downside even further is we always make sure from a financial perspective that if short-term rentals go away and we need to put somebody in the home as a long-term renter, will it at least cover all of its costs and hopefully make a small return? And that's the backup plan. Everything else goes down the drain and we had to, totally abandon the plan, is we always have that fallback in place to protect ourselves and our investors' capital.
Yeah, so I see Olga asked if you have another exit strategy, if I'm understanding correctly. So that's the other exit strategy, right? Oh, is to be able to convert it to a long-term rental, is it right?
I'll let Nate. Oh,
or
go
not.
ahead, Dan.
Maybe something else.
I think she's asking what is our plan when it's all said and done. So like, how do we plan on getting out of the short-term rental space now that we're into it? What we envision is we have everything set up right now. Like we have 3 different Airbnb accounts, 3 different VRBO accounts, and then we have everything synced into one spot. And we also have everything structured, like we have 3 completely different entities. So the long-term goal, I would say in about 10 years, is to be able to sell all of our businesses to an institutional investor. If that doesn't happen, then we're also still in a really good position where we have a cash flowing asset. And maybe if we have capital partners that invested with us after 10 years, if they want their capital, we can repay them back at that time. Or we can just sell the entire portfolio. We can all have a nice little payday and figure out what our next venture is. But we have a couple different exit strategies. The most ideal one to us right now is being able to sell both businesses.
And just to connect on that, so right now the way for the fund, just to kind of give an example, for the fund, our investors are looking about 20% return. And we factor that in, assuming in 10 years we're going to sell it to a residential home buyer. So we're not going to sell it to an institutional investor. My network specifically is kind of in that VC venture capital world. And I've had a few different conversations with individuals, and the strategy really is, how do you create the best portfolio in a concentrated area? If you can have a concentrated area where you need to probably be around that 25 plus kind of homes altogether. If you're, a 5 homes, a institutional investor is not going to be interested. But if they can pile $5 or $10 million into your fund or your purchase the homes that you've already got running, you have the asset, you have the Airbnb account, they know what the numbers are. That's really what they're looking for. And that's when you start talking about that 20% return turns into a 30% return, because it's significantly increasing it. And rather than valuing it as what a single family home would sell for, they're now valuing it somewhere between what a hotel and a single family home would value for. So now you're starting to talk about cap rates as opposed to just, again, hey, I'm a home buyer and I want to buy a first time home and I would spend $250. Now it's, hey, it's based on cap rate, it's worth $350. So that's where, again, it's like, how do you make this a true business as opposed to just an asset?
So also from your experience, do you see some common mistakes that new investors make in short-term rentals? Maybe something we can, because a lot of people here come with little experience, or so I think it would address a lot of people's concerns.
A lot of times people just think that they used to be able to do this. In Cleveland, you used to have like just an average property, throw some cheap furniture in there, a couple pieces of art. That's what I did when I first started and was doing it as a hobby. And I was okay. Like we were getting $300 to $400 per night on the weekends, and we did not have a nice property at all. If we did that same thing today, we would be one of those listings that are just buried at the very bottom and not have a lot of bookings at all. So the biggest thing is don't cut costs when it comes to furnishing. And honestly, like I would even say hire an interior designer, pay them like anywhere from $3,000 to $4,000 to just furnish the entire house. And all in with their fee, it should be around $20. So that's another thing to keep in mind when you're buying an Airbnb is it's going to have to be furnished. So I would say that's the biggest piece. You can't take shortcuts, because if you take shortcuts on the furniture and the designs, it's not going to show well. Your competition is going to beat you, and you might have to transition back to a regular, just standard rental.
So on average, how much do you say someone would need to spend on furnishing if using an interior designer and everything?
If you use a designer, it'll depend on how many bedrooms, how big the house is, but I'd say around $20,000, maybe slightly more than 23, but somewhere around there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would
sorry.
just to follow up on that, there's a couple, like three things really quick. One, the one night stays, just don't do them.
Oh yes,
that's again how you have your parties, and that's how you end up having your. Some people are like, well, if I set it to be a 3-night minimum, I'm gonna end up hurting myself. Our strategy is actually outside of 45 days. It's a 5-night requirement. 30 to 45 days is a 4-night requirement. So we actually scale it back, and then within 10 days, there's a 2-night requirement. So we'll never do less than 2 unless we have what's called orphan night, which means you have a check out and then a check in a day apart. So we have 1 open night, in which case we'll also jack up the rate. So rather than being $200 a night, it's now $400 a night. So if it doesn't fill, so be it. But if it does fill, it's gonna be at a higher rate. So we're gonna attract a higher quality tenant. The second mistake I would say people make is do everything. When Dan and I first started, he was actually driving to his Airbnb, which was 50 minutes away, to clean the property himself. I complained to him nonstop every day. I talked to him and I said he needs to stop doing that. He needs to find a cleaner. His time's more valuable. Focus on the business rather than being the cleaner. He ended up selling the property and it's all said and done. But again, I think you need to realize if you want to grow this, you need to figure out how to get the right people in place. And then on that same note, software. So put in at least have a dynamic pricing software. So again, Price Labs, I highly recommend. I'd say if there's just one tool, it'd be a dynamic pricing software. There's a ton of other tools you can use, but look to grow through software as well. And Price Labs is a great one.
Yep.
That's so true. We also, most of the time we can't do everything by ourselves because taking a flight and everything is a bit costly. But when we were in Finland, it was very, very tempting to go to each property if there was a maintenance request and just do it. So I completely relate to that. Yeah, I think it's really important. It forces us to find the ways to do things that help us scale it as well. So
exactly.
So you've mentioned the fund. You said it's for 10 years, right? How can you provide insights of this investment strategy? How do you build a fund? What is it exactly?
Vince, I'll defer to you on this one.
Yeah, and so I just want to make sure, are you asking for clarification around how to do it at home, where you're at, or how to do it here in the States?
Just walk us through to what does it mean exactly? Yeah.
Yeah, so the idea of a fund is that we're going to all get folks to help pool their money together so we can go invest in multiple projects. If you were to pool your money together, invest in a single project, you would refer to that as a syndication. So just to be aware of that right off the bat. With a fund, you're actually creating an entity like an LLC. And then with our fund, there's $2 million we're raising, and that's broken into 40 units, each valued at $50,000. So when somebody wants to invest, they're going to technically be buying a unit or a percentage of a business whose sole focus is to go buy these homes and try to maximize the profit and the return. So you are then an owner in the homes, and that allows you to get the tax benefits. It allows you to have that ownership perspective and mindset. But to our point earlier, it's a completely passive approach to investing. So while you and your team might be saying, well, we'd like to do more Airbnbs where we're at, you might still be saying, but in the meantime, we can invest in this other business, Home Hop, Cleveland, and they can go do all the things that they just explained to us, and our money can be working for us. And so in short, you use a specialized attorneys to help you set this up. There's things like a private placement memorandum, which is a long document that goes through and explains what to expect, how things work in terms of outcomes, and who has the ability to do this, that, or the other. And there's also a few other accompanying documents for folks that want to sign up. For our fund, investor could be an individual person, or it could be an entity. So if you and your team said, we're all a big business, could our business invest in your fund and buy some of these units that you're referring to? The short answer is yes. So to set it up, you work with the attorneys. You're again creating a pool of all the funds that then when we determine there's a good property or home to buy, we can immediately go buy it. And we don't have to try to raise money every single time, because yourself or some members might go, wow, I think that's a good home, let's do it. And other people might go, I don't think that's a good one, I don't want to invest. But that really creates a lot of communication and follow-up that needs to be done. So are you investing in this one and not that one? Are you investing in that one and not this one? When you have that fund, you're giving the onus, you're putting your faith in us, the general partners, to go use that money to go buy homes that are going to meet that criteria that we've explained. So for our approach, we've talked through the returns a little bit, but the way that it works is we offer our investors an 8% preferred return. And if you want to open up your screen share to allow me to share the screen, I can just show you one slide that I think will help paint a picture for folks. And let me know when that's done. But with that, we offer a 8% preferred return. After the 8% gets paid out to you all, the investors, the rest of the profit is split 55% for you, 45% for us, the GPs. So when you add in the 8% you get, plus that amount that's split up after the fact, your average cash on cash return per year is about 9 to 11%. Then when Nate talked about over time, you're going to build equity in the home, you're going to have that cash flow, you're going to have appreciation. What would then happen is when we go to liquidate the fund, your ultimate return comes out to about 19 to 21%. And that's your average annual return. So again, if you want to disable or allow me to share, I'm happy to just show you one slide.
I'm not sure because we don't have a lot of time left, and I do want us to have also time for questions. So maybe at the end.
No problem. Did that answer your question in terms of the fund? I tried to be.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
What do you see as the future of short-term rentals? Do you think it would still be so trendy and would be as it is today and grow more, or do you think it would be different? And how do you plan to adapt your strategies to be ahead?
So I do believe the short-term rental market and the industry as a whole is going to continue to grow. I also believe that there are some operators out there that are in for kind of a rude awakening. We're starting to see it already where some other local hosts, you probably see it in the Facebook group where they talk about things starting to slow down a little bit, vacancies starting to pick up. And we're me and Nate talked about this morning, and all of our properties are pretty booked right now. Besides, we have like 4 vacation style homes versus homes just close to downtown. And our calendar is still staying active and thriving. So I think there's still going to be a demand for it, but I think the standard is going to continue to rise as there's more and more better looking properties and people figuring this model out, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast the other day as well, and they were talking about the life cycle of a maturing, well, it's an asset class, a maturing business segment, and Airbnb falls into that. So 10 years ago, it was the ma pa putting a couch in a room. Then it turned into, okay, we got to have a little bit more sophistication, and now you're getting to the point where if there's a place to ultimately make money, sophisticated investors are going to get in and figure out how to scale and streamline that business. And I think we're starting to the point now where if you want to be successful, you need to be professional. It's people are actually looking for professionally hosted and professionally managed properties now, as opposed to maybe the old school of, I want to stay on someone's couch or I want to stay in a shared home. So it's really, how do you make this professional? And I think that's only going to benefit the industry as well as it becomes more mature. One of the reasons people don't want to stay in Airbnb is because they don't want to have a bad mattress or a bad cleaning job because they don't have the systems in place. And the more this industry can mature, the better it's going to be for the industry as a whole.
So I see we have a few questions. So do you recommend using a cleaning team or a payroll monthly rate by rent reservation?
Yeah, what we do is we pay them per job. So I think we're paying them around, depending on how many bedrooms, how big, but usually around $130 per cleaning. But the guest reimburses us. So the guest actually pays that $130 cleaning fee before they book. And once everything is signed off and we can confirm that the house has been cleaned by our cleaner, again, it goes back to building systems and automation. They go into their Slack channel. They know exactly what to say. When they say that, a bill is automatically created in QuickBooks. I have some Zapier zaps going on where it automatically does that. And now I can track who needs paid, who I have paid, etc. So I would recommend a per reservation, or I'm sorry, per cleaning. And then again, just create your tracking up front to be able to track who you paid and who you have yet to pay.
And we have, if anyone has more questions, this is the time to put it in the chat. Okay, so you pointed out 20 plus return, 20% plus. And the three questions are you flipping distressed houses so the numbers still will work? I think they mean no, but you mentioned you're buying the houses already renovated, so flips maybe that other investors have flipped.
I can run through them really quick if you want. So on the point number one, so are we flipping distressed houses? Primarily, we're buying turnkey because the beautiful thing about Airbnb is the ability to cash flow instantly. So we can purchase a property, close on it, and within 30 days have it up and running and cash flowing. If we find a property we really like and it has a unique feature, so actually our best performing home this summer was a property that had a pool that we bought in February. It was outdated, and we do have the flipping background. So we actually leveraged our team. We have GCs in the area. My dad actually owns a tile store out here. Again, our whole network is in Cleveland. We remodeled the kitchen. We did new flooring, redid the bathroom. So we put about $60,000 of work into it. It has a pool. It ended up grossing around $12,000 a month during the summer, which again, when you're buying a home for $200,000, you can gross $12,000 in a month. Are very, very strong results. So if there's a property that has a unique feature, we will do remodels, but that's going to be maybe less than 15-20% of the fund. The majority of it's going to be these turnkey focused, but we're not going to do any large renovations. So we're not going to find a home that's down to the studs where we're completely redoing everything. So it's more of those cosmetic renovations.
Can I answer that question?
What was that?
Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, please.
Okay. I was gonna say, if you want, I can jump on to number two really quick.
Yeah.
Unless you had a specific question.
No, please.
Okay. How is it like to plan the project with the work teams? So for us, and I'll just kind of take this question as I think. So for us, we're looking daily on the market. We also will get some off-market deals, just especially with Dan's network being really strong in the Cleveland market. So whether it's an off-market deal or an on-market deal, we're constantly looking for deals. We have my CPA background. I've created a pro forma for us, so I can quickly plug in the numbers and get a general sense if this is a property that's going to meet our fund expectations. And ultimately, if it's not going to meet that 20+% return, we're not going to move on it. If it does, then we have a team, again, that can go out, check on the property, do the reviews, a very trusted inspector to make sure that we're not missing anything. So really collaborating on each individual home to make sure it's going to be a profitable endeavor for us. And then how can you keep up with the fund's timeline? So again, the beautiful thing about what we've done is, originally it was, let's just create our own portfolio. So we own 9 homes. Hey, we're doing really well at this. Let's do property management. This is going to be extra cash for us. It's going to allow us to grow the team out. Did very well at that. Ultimately, our goal is ownership. So now let's create this fund because we have all the processes, we have the people, we have the team. And with that, one of our director of operations was our previous interior designer. So she kind of helps to lead that onboarding of properties. So we kind of had those pieces in place. We have the maintenance man, we have the team just to help set up the property. So we feel very comfortable. We can average about 2 properties a month as far as our onboarding goes. We could probably push it if we really needed to, but about 2 a month is what we plan to if we wanted to. So that's kind of how we're able to be able to accommodate that 25-ish. And again, I think when it's all said and done, it'll probably be closer to 20 properties for the fund. So that kind of answers those 3. And if you want, I can look at that last question.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So at any time, are you planning to cash out and pay off the investors and keep the property only for the 3 of you? So the way that works is during the liquidation. So investors are going to get paid quarterly. So again, there's that preferred return that Vince talked about, which is 8%. It would end up being closer to 9 to 11% because there's going to be profits above that, but that, call it 10% a year in cash. And then whenever we do liquidate, investors get their principal back first. So if they invested $50K, they get that $50K back first. And then the profits through appreciation and paying down the mortgage, that's then going to get split with 55% going to our investors and 45% going to us as the GPs. So we're incentivized to do well. We don't have the ability to just take back the investors' money and keep the properties. It is a requirement as part of the fund that they are going to have that 55% upside stake, and we get the 45% upside stake.
Can I ask one more question? I'm the guy with the 3 questions. Thank you. So I guess my question is kind of, maybe if you can shortly walk me through the process of finding a renovated property and put in the numbers in a way that you can find, like you can put it on a business plan and see that it can brings, let's say, 20% return. I'm asking from a standpoint of understanding when you have a good property that is renovated, you are selling it already in on a premium, right? On a premium price. So already it's kind of, you're starting at a higher price. Now you need to bring the information you have from your experience, Airbnb and everything, and kind of say, okay, this property might cost us more than, I don't know, buying a distressed house and flipping it, but we have the day-to-day rentals in the area and the occupancy percentages, so we believe that this business plan can work. If you can kind of walk me through this shortly.
Yeah, so I think the key there is know your strength. For us, we did flipping, so we know it's something we can do, but it's not the focus of the fund. There's some funds that might focus on renovating homes, and that's going to be their focus. For us, our strength is the hospitality business. With that, again, CPA kind of finance background, I've created a number of different spreadsheets that allow me to say, okay, if our principal is this or our mortgage is this, I know our property tax rates. We have a portfolio of properties to know roughly what's our insurance going to be, what's our utilities going to be. Like, we really have a pretty dialed in pro forma, and that's really from experience. So that's because we've been here, we've done that, we know the market, we know the industry. And that even speaks to the revenues as well. We can look, and out of the 20 properties we have, I have 7 that fit our fund criteria. And every single month, and Dan and Vince can advocate to this, every month I'm comparing, what did my projections say for the fund? What did those 7 properties that are going to fit that fund criteria do? And I was pretty proud this summer. We actually beat the fund criteria percentage by 7%. So again, it's always underwriting to the conservative, knowing your numbers the best as possible. If you don't know what your revenue is going to be, again, you don't have that portfolio, AirDNA is a great place to look. Looking online and seeing what do their occupancies look like roughly by pretending to be a guest and trying to book, seeing what their rates are. You kind of get a general sense of it. But really understanding the market is such a key. And that's, again, something that kind of comes from experience and can also come from doing diligence by reaching out to other local professionals and kind of asking them and probing them.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you so much. I see we exceeded a bit, and thank you again. Do you have one last tip, success story, or valuable lesson you want to share? And that would be your last thing.
Success story, I think it's honestly within our team. It's been really cool to like start on this 2 years ago and now see like one of our cleaners. I found her off Craigslist. Like, I just responded to a random Craigslist ad. She became one of our cleaners, and now she's been promoted and she's in charge of overseeing all cleaning operations. So she's the one that's checking in on all the other cleaners, things like that. And then same thing with our designer. The girl that we were using to design and furnish our houses, she's now our director of operations. And she kind of like my secondhand gal, where she kind of helps me oversee everything, put more systems in place, hold accountability, things such as that. So that's probably been my biggest success story with Airbnb, is just watching other people grow and thrive.
That's amazing. That's really a good advice. And thank you so much for today. We really, really appreciate it. A lot of people had to leave early, but we'll watch the recording later. And it was really so interesting and valuable.
Yeah, our pleasure. Thanks for having us on. I
yeah,
love doing
Thanks
this
for
type
having
of
us,
thing.
Julia.
Yeah, it's our pleasure.
Nice meeting you guys.
Thank
Thanks,
you very
guys.
much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.